The Buffalo Bills have their work cut out for them in 2025. What are the biggest challenges from each opponent? We're exploring that today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino, author of the Herd Mentality Substack, co-host of the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast, co-host of the NFL First Read Podcast, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Want to thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day, and a big welcome and shout out to our everydayers. You know who you are. Those of you who never miss a single episode, I appreciate y'all being here very, very much. I'd also like to invite you to subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Well, folks, welcome in. It is NFL schedule release week, and so we're going to talk a lot about the schedule, which comes out Wednesday night, 8 o'clock Eastern time. And while we don't know when each game will be played or the order of when the games will be played, we do know the opponents. And so my objective today is to look at the different opponents that the Bills face. We'll look at every single one of them. And I want to discuss the biggest challenge that each opponent presents to the Buffalo Bills. Not necessarily the best thing about each team that the Bills face, but what gives me the greatest concern specifically for the Buffalo Bills to handle. And so this will be fun. We'll start off by talking through the heavy hitters that the Bills face in the AFC. Then we'll talk about the rest of the AFC and division games, and then the slate of games against the NFC. Should be a fun conversation. Let's get into it. Let's start with the Baltimore Ravens. The Bills play them. And I think the biggest challenge that the Ravens present for the Bills is their rushing offense. I don't think it's singularly Derrick Henry or singularly Lamar Jackson. It's both of them, and having to deal with them at the same time. Now, you're not going to stop Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry. You're going to try to contain them and limit them as much as possible. These are marquee playmakers in the NFL. And so, as part of this conversation, I want to not only identify what the biggest challenge is for the Bills, but what function of the Bills the onus is on to figure it out. And so when I think about this Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry rushing duo, I think of two things. Number one is scoring points. Scoring points and controlling the game script is huge. You want to help your run defense? Score points. Get teams out of their two-dimensional attack. And I think that was a big deal in the playoff win in the divisional round for the Bills over Baltimore. Was Bills were able to get a bit of a lead, and they got away from their rushing offense a little bit, which was helpful. Now, outside of just scoring points and making them throw the football more than they want to, it's about the defensive front seven. It's about the defensive front seven, where the Bills have made a lot of investments, particularly on the defensive line. And you've got a couple of linebackers in Terrell Bernard, who's a team captain that just got an extension, and Matt Milano, who's been a mainstay on this defense for a long time. They got to answer the call. Got to answer the call. So score points and be stout up front. You'd like to think these investments that Buffalo has made in this front can really help minimize, right? Minimize, I think, is the right word, the damage that Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry can do running the football. Let's get to the Kansas City Chiefs next. And the Chiefs I have a different answer for than any other team. I think the biggest challenge with the Chiefs is making the regular season game matter. It just hasn't. It just hasn't. The Bills have won the last 4 in the regular season, 2 of them by multiple scores. But they've dropped the last 4 in the playoffs. Even when the Bills had the opportunity to be the higher seed, it didn't matter. They came to Buffalo and won the game in the postseason. So I don't even know how to approach this Chiefs game this year. Do I want the Bills to win? I mean, of course I do. But this whole cycle of beating the Chiefs in the regular season and having the feel-good moment is pretty empty. Who cares? Like honestly, who cares? You've lost to them 4 times in the postseason after beating them 4 times in the regular season. So who's the onus on? It's on the coaching staff. The Bills coaching staff has got to find a better script in the postseason, particularly on the defensive side of the football. So the biggest challenge for the Chiefs this year is making that regular season game matter. Could you imagine them beating them for a 5th time in a row in the regular season, only to drop another one in the postseason? Come on. Nobody wants that. Let's get to the Cincinnati Bengals. The biggest challenge that the Bengals pose to the Buffalo Bills is their passing offense. Joe Burrow, T. Higgins, Jamar Chase. It's a lethal situation. Now, fortunately, there's a lot of questions about the rest of the Bengals operation, their defense, a lot of questions. Can they run the ball? Do they have the offensive line talent? Those questions have existed for a while. And we haven't seen a ton of Bills versus Bengals in terms of the Joe Burrow Bengals against the Josh Allen Bills. We saw like 2 games and then the beginning of the DeMar Hamlin game, and none of it looked very good for the Bills on defense. I think Joe Burrow and the timing and precision and accuracy that he plays with those receivers against a Bills zone defense that they've just been able to dice up, it doesn't seem to work. So who is the onus on for the Bills to slow down this Burrow, Chase, Higgins trio? I think a lot of it's on the defensive coaching, having better game plans. I remember the year that Sean McDermott was the defensive coordinator against the Bengals, and he blitzed Joe Burrow like crazy, and that didn't work. And then Leslie Frazier in the playoff loss, playing off coverage and just conceding completions and hoping that Joe Burrow made a mistake. That didn't work. So let's come up with a better game plan and then ultimately play tighter. Play tighter, get some pass rush, give yourself a chance against a team that you really, really haven't looked good against in, 9-10 quarters, something like that. Last up in the AFC heavy hitters would be the Houston Texans. 3rd season with C.J. Stroud and head coach D'Amico Ryans. They've won the division 2 years in a row. They've won a playoff game 2 years in a row. The biggest challenge I think Houston presents for Buffalo is their passing defense. And boy, Josh Allen had one of the worst games of his career against Houston last year in that road game. And I think a lot of that came down to some of the dynamics of the game still early in the season before Amari Cooper arrived. The Bills were without Khalil Shakir. I thought that mattered a ton. I think Josh Allen probably pressed a little bit, wanting to put up big numbers against Stephon Diggs and all that. But that pass defense is legit in Houston. They're loaded in the secondary. Derek Stingley and Kamari Lassiter the other side. They got Chauncey Gardner-Johnson now in the slot, a couple of good young safeties. And they're loaded with pass rushers. Will Anderson and Daniil Hunter. That's a heck of a duo. And they got guys on the interior that can rush too, and Danico Autry and Mario Edwards. So their pass defense is legit. And they're very, very disciplined with their scheme. They play sound defense. So who's the onus on? It's on Joe Brady and Josh Allen. Again, I think Khalil Shakir's availability, especially early in the season, you got all the new receivers. Before the Amari Cooper trade, you're without Khalil Shakir. It was kind of a nightmare recipe. But that pass defense was legit all year in Houston. I think they've added to it in terms of D-line depth and even in the secondary. Another year of time on task. That'll be a big one for Joe Brady and Josh Allen to answer the call. All right, folks, coming up next, we'll get into the divisional games, the Steelers and the Browns, so be sure to stick with me. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live. With player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays, fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. Folks, you've been watching these playoffs. You know which players are showing up. You know which teams are hot. Get in on the action. It's so much more fun when you have a few bets on the line. You're looking at player props, whether it's over, under on point totals, over, under for the game total. If you have a good feel for who's going to win, get in on the action and make these playoff games that are exciting even more exciting. If you got a read on who's heating up, why not back it up with a same game parlay? How could $200 in bonus bets add to the excitement if your first $5 bet hits? If you're new to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up, because if you do head on over to FanDuel and place your first $5 bet, if it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, let's work through the rest of this AFC schedule. Next up, we'll talk Pittsburgh Steelers. I think the biggest challenge for the Bills against Pittsburgh is going to be their defensive line. This team's loaded. TJ Watt, Cam Hayward is ageless. Alex Highsmith is a stud. Keanu Benton, really good young interior player. They drafted Derek Harmon in the first round. You guys know I like him. Nate Herbig is a really athletic third guy off the edge for them. They got guys inside and outside. And obviously the Bills took care of business against Pittsburgh in that playoff game. I think they didn't have TJ Watt, did they? That probably matters a little bit. But we've seen Pittsburgh's defense give not only Josh Allen some trouble, but the Bills' protection schemes some trouble. So when I think about who the onus is on here, it's a combination of several components. Of course, your offensive line, but Joe Brady and Aaron Cromer and how they choose to protect. And then, of course, Josh Allen for navigating those challenges. There's going to be free rushers. There's going to be overload pressures, and Josh Allen has to navigate that in addition to the blocking, winning, and having the right schemes to give yourself your best opportunity to be successful as an offense. So they got a ton of dudes up front, and they've really elevated their secondary as well with Joey Porter Jr. They bring in Darius Slay on a one-year deal, Minkah Fitzpatrick. They're a talented defense, and if you don't play smart and have the right schemes, it's a big play defense that can get negative plays and turnovers, and that's been a big part of the script. Pittsburgh's good every year, not because they have quarterback play, and that quarterback play in a while. It's because they get big plays on defense. They can run the ball. They get opportunistic moments on special teams. You've heard me talk about it. It's the Steelers script. And you remember that opening game a couple years ago? Bills hosting the Steelers. Absolutely beautiful day in Western New York. Only for the Bills to fall into the Steelers script. Take care of that D-line. Next up, the Cleveland Browns. This comes down to one player. It's Myles Garrett. You've heard me say it. Myles Garrett is the best defensive player in the NFL. I think Cleveland's got some good players in the secondary. A lot of questions on offense. A lot of questions elsewhere on their defense. No questions about that Myles Garrett guy. Game wrecker. Who's the onus on? Deion Dawkins. That's good on good. That's going to be a great matchup. Great matchup of good on good. And I think we've learned this offseason that Deion and Myles Garrett are pretty tight. You know there's going to be a lot on the line for that one. So it's Myles Garrett. That's the guy that can wreck a game. Big moment for Deion Dawkins. Good on good. And Myles will move around a little bit. He mostly rushes off the defensive right side, so he'll get a lot of matchups against Dawkins, but you can't hide. You know, if you're going to get matchups, probably Spencer Brown will have some matchups, but I think it mostly comes down to Deion Dawkins at left tackle. All right, let's talk about these divisional opponents. We'll get to the Jets first. I think the biggest challenge that the Jets pose to the Bills is their linebacker duo of Jamian Sherwood and Quincy Williams. It's a really good pair. They're young, they're athletic, they're rangy, they can cover. Their matchup style players, and they're very good in coverage at taking away throwing windows. And for the Bills that like to kind of work the intermediate area of the field and funnel the ball to Khalil Shakir, use the tight ends, those players are kind of equipped to take some of that away. And, they obviously have Sauce Gardner at one corner spot. We'll see at the other side. They got Brandon Stevens, who's an underwhelming player, but Michael Carter's a pretty good slot guy. Andre Sisco now at safety. So I think kind of that overall package, but mostly the linebackers, kind of challenge you to work certain areas of the field in the passing game. And so the onus for me against the Jets really comes down to Joe Brady having a good game plan to be able to mitigate your risk throwing the ball into the middle of the field in those areas that those linebackers can kind of take away, but then also being able to run the football. I'm unimpressed by the Jets front as it relates to run defense. And so I think that's an important game to come in and control it with your rushing offense and then be able to work your perimeter matchups in the passing game. So I think there's a script here, but that's the part of the Jets that I think presents the biggest challenge for the Bills. Next up is the Miami Dolphins. I think the biggest challenge that Miami presents to the Bills is their collection of offensive skill players. Tyreek Hill still around. We'll see what happens there. But Jalen Waddle, Jonnu Smith, Devon Achane, it's like all of them at once is just a lot to deal with. And I know the Bills have had a lot of success against Miami, and they have a lot of questions in South Beach that they have to get figured out with their secondary, and big year for Mike McDaniel. He'll probably have to coach above the talent on the roster. But I think this mix of skill players is very potent, and it's obviously something that gives you a little bit of pause, right? I mean, even if you feel comfortable about playing Miami, when some of these guys get the ball in their hands, you kind of hold your breath because they can really go. And I think they've just been able to add to that collection. And I like some of what's going on with their offensive line, bringing in Jonas Savianaya, James Daniels. Aaron Brewer was a heck of a find for them at center. Get Austin Jackson back at tackle. They drafted Patrick Paul in the second round to be their left tackle. Pretty rangy offensive line to kind of maximize some of those schemed manufactured throws. They like to get the screen game going. They can stress you in some ways. So the onus is collectively on the defense, where I think the Bills probably match up as well as they have personnel-wise against Miami with what you think this Bills defense is going to look like. But I think one of the biggest reasons for the Bills' success against Miami has been game scripts. And I think Mike McDaniel, I think he gets goofy, in particular coaching against the Bills, where it's like he makes some backbreaking decisions trying to chase points, going for it midfield and not getting it. And now, you blink your eye and they're down 2 scores and now they're not running the football. And so I think that's important, but defense collectively being able to contain these guys as much as possible. And then, I think scoring against Miami early puts them in a bit of a funk. They chase it and doesn't usually end well for them. But the biggest challenge to me is those offensive skill players. That's what gives me the biggest reservation against Miami. Last team in the AFC East, the New England Patriots. I think the biggest challenge for them is their secondary. Secondary's freaking loaded. Christian Gonzalez, one of the best young corners in the league. They pay Carlton Davis a bunch of money to come over and be the other corner, good press man corner. Marcus Jones, a good slot player. Kyle Duggar and Jabril Peppers at safety. It's a good group. And they've obviously added a ton to their defense as well, particularly in the front. A little bit more range at linebacker and Robert Spillane, but it's that secondary that really stands out. Who's the onus on? Well, it's on Josh Allen and Joe Brady. Joe Brady to have the right calls, the right schemes, and Josh Allen to appropriately go after those matchups. It's the type of game where you feel like their perimeter guys will have a fair amount of success against the Bills receivers outside. So how do you get the ball to your slot, right? Whether that's Kincaid, Shakir, your backs, right? I think it's a big running backs game to throw the ball to them. You'll have to be able to work the ball to some different areas. And that comes down to Joe Brady, Josh Allen. Brady with the schemes, Allen with the execution. All right, the Bills face some challenging opponents in the NFC, including the reigning Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles. I'll talk about the biggest challenge they present and the rest of the NFC slate here on the other side of it. Folks, be sure to stick with me. Welcome back. We're going to get into the rest of this schedule, focusing in on the NFC and the biggest challenge that each team presents to the Buffalo Bills. I'm excited to get this schedule on Wednesday night. We'll stop speculating, but tomorrow we're going to talk about the quarterbacks on the schedule. I'm going to rank all the quarterbacks in the league, all the projected starting quarterbacks in the league, and then we'll be able to look at, all right, the Bills face the whatever, 2, 3, 7, 12, whatever quarterbacks. Talk about where they're at in their careers and kind of how they match up against this Bills defense. Next up today, though, the Philadelphia Eagles, Super Bowl champs. I think the biggest challenge that Philly presents to Buffalo is the collection of offensive freaks, in particular, A.J. Brown and Saquon Barkley. Those guys are big, strong, and fast. They're different kind of cats there. Present a lot of problems. And then, so it's those guys, right? Like anybody would have a hard time dealing with A.J. Brown and Saquon Barkley. But then it's, oh, by the way, Devonta Smith's really good with a completely different type of skill set. That would be a game where you would say, Christian Benford, you're on A.J. Brown. Maxwell Harrison, you're on Devonta Smith. You see how the complementary skill sets work there? Dallas Goedert at tight end or Goddard at tight end. He's a good player. And then it's Jalen Hurts as this dual threat quarterback. Just puts a lot of stress on a defense, right? You got to be big, strong, and physical. You have to be athletic. You got to deal with a quarterback that has a lot at his disposal in terms of athleticism. Can throw the ball down the field. It's a lot to deal with. So who's the onus on? Well, it's the defense, right? The defense has to show up. Pass rush, in particular, I think is critical. Got to be able to defend the run. They just put so much stress on the overall defense. You got to have the right plan. You got to execute. Next up, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The biggest challenge to me with the Buccaneers is Baker Mayfield. I think Baker Mayfield's a good quarterback. And he's so competitive. He keeps dealing. Even when you feel like he's out, you can't count him out. He keeps coming back. He keeps scratching and clawing. It's a player that you just watch and get a lot of respect for. At least I do. And so it's Baker Mayfield, but it's also what's at his disposal. They've really developed their run game there with Bucky Irving. Good-looking offensive line. Mike Evans at receiver. Chris Godwin. Their first-round pick was Emeka Egbuka at receiver. Jalen McMillan was like a mid-round steal for them at receiver. So it's Baker Mayfield. It's what's at his disposal. It's a multifaceted offense, but it's really the competitor that Baker Mayfield is. So I find that to be the biggest challenge with Tampa. Hopefully we bring them to the season up north late in the season. That's my hope there. Next up, the New Orleans Saints. The biggest challenge for them in terms of what they present to the Bills is speed at receiver. Chris Olave, Brandon Cooks, Rashid Shaheed. That is a lot of vertical receiving skill. Fast guys that win down the field. Particularly Rashid Shaheed, but he's coming off injury. Chris Olave, obviously, he's also coming off injury. A lot of transition with the Saints, new coaching staff. And they're always in a bit of a salary cap funk. They have huge questions at quarterback, right? It's Tyler Shuck versus Spencer Rattler. But they got some guys that can really run and stretch the field. That would be my biggest concern. The onus then becomes the secondary and the pass rush. Got to get home on these longer developing pass plays. You got to be secure in coverage. Next up is the Atlanta Falcons. I think the biggest challenge that Atlanta presents to the Bills is the multifaceted playmaking ability of running back Bijan Robinson. He's one of those complete dynamic backs. Big, physical, explosive, can run inside and outside, can catch the football. One of those, right? The Jonathan Taylors, the Saquon Barkleys, the Bijan Robinsons, those types of dudes, right? they're tough to deal with. And I think the onus for the Bills becomes on the defensive front. And I like how the Bills' defensive line actually stacks up against Atlanta's offensive line. It's the second level that's going to have to really take care of business. I think that's where they'll look to find some matchup advantages. Isolating the size, explosiveness, playmaking instincts of Bijan Robinson up against whoever on the second level, Taron Johnson, Terrell Bernard, Matt Milano. But if the front holds up, that's going to go a long way. I think Atlanta has a ton of questions on defense. I think you can probably count on scoring some points there and maybe taking Bijan out of the game a little bit. But he's one of those backs that you say, don't really want to deal with him. I think that's the biggest challenge from Atlanta to the Bills. Last up, the Carolina Panthers. I think the Bills match up pretty well with Carolina, but I will say if there's something on their team that makes you say, it's probably their massive offensive line. Ike Ekwonu at left tackle, Damian Lewis at left guard, Robert Hunt at right guard, Taylor Moton at right tackle. Those four dudes are all over 320 pounds. They can all move. They're all physical. Austin Corbett, their center, he's not 320, but he's rangy. And you know they're going to want to run the football. They've been investing in backs. Chuba Hubbard, kind of emerging talent for them. You know they're going to want to run the football, shorten the game. Bryce Young's not going to come out and be this like ideal quarterback to throw the ball 35, 40 times a game. They're going to want to run the ball, lean on that offensive line, and then use Bryce Young as more of a point guard. The challenge then becomes the onus is on the defensive line, where you're not going to be as big. Every single matchup, the Bills could be conceding 30 pounds, which doesn't mean you can't be stout up front. You play with good technique and good leverage, good instincts, you'll be fine. But you definitely have a big physical Panthers offensive line against a Bills defensive line that is more speed and twitch. So that should be a good matchup. Obviously, Carolina gave up the most points in NFL history last year, so you feel like you should be able to score and then make them one-dimensional throwing the ball, and then you can use your athleticism to rush the passer, and you got Bryce Young back there who's still got a lot to prove in the NFL, although he certainly played a lot better down the stretch last season. So there you have it, folks. Working through the schedule, working through the opponents, talking about the biggest challenge that each team presents for the Bills and what operation of the Bills the onus is on to figure that out. Hopefully you found this to be an enlightening conversation. And I'm excited for one more schedule preview type chat tomorrow. Like I said, we're talking about the quarterback matchups on the schedule, right? All this stuff matters, but let's be honest, it's quarterbacks. That's what drives the league. And so we're going to talk about those quarterback matchups tomorrow. And then Wednesday night, we get the schedule. And so I'll make sure that some point Wednesday evening, I give you my full analysis. And like I said yesterday, if you've been an everydayer, you know what's coming. We really get into the weeds and break down the schedule from a bunch of different angles. So hopefully you'll come out of that conversation feeling like you got a great feel for what's ahead of the Buffalo Bills in 2025. So schedule release week. I'm having a lot of fun getting ready for it. I'm excited for it to come, and I'm excited to continue to break everything down for you all week, all year long here on Locked On Bills. So as always, I kindly ask that you share, subscribe, rate, and review. Have a great rest of your day. Go Bills, and I look forward to catching up with you again real soon.